Hello, and welcome to Birthing Beyond Borders, a podcast where we share the stories of migrant moms from around the world. From sleepless nights to moments of joy, we'll be diving into the real, raw, and inspiring journeys of motherhood. Get ready to laugh, learn, and experience a range of emotions while being inspired. I am your host, Adejumoke Olopade, and together we'll uncover the challenges, celebrate the wins, and honor the wisdom mothers carry across borders. Welcome to our community space. On this episode, I have with me Matilda, who is an immigrant from Ghana and is currently working on her PhD. Matilda, welcome to the Birthing Beyond Borders podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Jumoke, and it's a privilege to be a part of this project.
Yeah, I'm so glad to, have you talk about your experience being a mom and being a full-time student as well, pursuing a PhD. And so I usually would start this conversation by asking my guests to tell us a little bit about themselves. We know you're from Ghana. How long have you lived in the US? Do you have family here in the US? What brought you to the US? Did you, move out to the US for academic purposes, or did you have family and you decided to come out to live with family?
So, by way of introduction, my name is Matilda, and I'm currently a fifth year doctoral student at the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee. And I'm getting my PhD in African history, and my specialization is US immigration history and 20th century African immigrations to the United States and empire studies. And I moved to the United States in 2019. I came to do my master's in a university in Illinois, Northern Illinois University. And then afterwards, I transitioned into my PhD program because the initial intent for my immigration was to come and pursue doctoral studies. And so that's currently what I am doing. And for family background, I am the first child out of four. And so that's quite a big responsibility. So yes, I've been here since 2019.
Thank you. And when you say, being the first child with three siblings, and that's a big responsibility, what does that mean? What does that look like for an African immigrant?
Honestly, it means being like the second mother and having to bear a lot of, emotional responsibility and everyone looking up to you to set a certain template for the rest to follow. And so it really is a lot of pressure because it's a lot of people who are invested in the life choices and the life decisions that you make. So it's a heavy bag to carry, I would say.
Yeah, I really hear that. And, and I know a lot of firstborn, particularly firstborn female children of African homes would definitely share that perspective as well. Before I move on to my next section, as you know, this podcast is for African immigrant mothers to talk about their birthing experience here in the US. I want to know, what's your favorite thing about living in the US?
My favorite thing about living in the US is access to certain infrastructure. So, for example, let's say the access to books and things like internet. Like, if I need to look up something on the internet, it's just in less than a second, I can do that. And just access to things like if there's this book that has been released, I can just go to the library and borrow it and read it. And it's so crazy how some of these things have become a deeply embedded part of my life that I can't even remember what my life before this looked like. So I honestly would say access to certain infrastructure like internet and then, books, and even being able to go to multiple stores and buy a dress without the hassle of having to wake up at dawn and trek to the market, like we do back. So it really is the access to infrastructure and certain goods and products.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, let's get to the sweet part. Um, I want to talk about pregnancy and childbirth experience. And to kick us off, I want you to take us to that moment when you found out you were pregnant. What did it feel like?
Excitement. So I remember that day so clearly. So the day I took my pregnancy test, so let me just backtrack a bit. So I have a honeymoon baby. That's how I got my my bundle of joy. Yeah. So I got married, went to my honeymoon, came back to the US. So I had to take a couple of weeks from school to go to Ghana and go and do the ceremony, leave my husband behind and come back and come and continue schoolwork. So I come back after the honeymoon, the festivities, the pomp and pageantry and everything, and then find out, okay, I've missed my period. And in a casual conversation with a friend, she's like, go and check. I mean, I wasn't my mind didn't go to pregnancy because I usually have my period late, so I wasn't too worried. But she's like, go and check. I mean, you went to Ghana to enjoy yourself in quotes, so might as well go and check. So I go to Walgreens, I buy the test kit, and then I do it, and then it says I'm pregnant, and it was just so funny for me. And then the funny thing is that I couldn't even tell my husband because I remember clearly that day it was a day that there was a WhatsApp outage in the whole of Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if in Nigeria they had the same thing, but there was a day when the internet was out, so there was no way to even share the good news with my husband.
Oh my gosh.
And so what I did was that I wrote you're going to be a dad on like a sticky note,
Mm-hmm.
and then I took a picture of it and then I emailed it to him.
Oh.
And I wasn't hearing any feedback from him. But then the next day, I got like multiple calls from him. He's like, okay, what is going on? Like, okay, I got this news. So then I'm like, okay, yeah, so we are going to have a baby. So that's how I broke the pregnancy news to him. And then afterwards, I told my mom. And surprisingly, she wasn't even surprised. I don't even know why. Because for her, she said it was her prayer. Like she had been praying that, okay, I would have a baby like ASAP. So she wasn't as shocked as
Mm-hmm.
I expected her. She was just very excited and, like very accepting of the fact that, okay, the new reality, we are going to work in it and we are going to do it. So, yeah, for me, I guess, yeah, that's the story of my first emotion with regards to the news.
That's exciting, and thank you for sharing that. I heard you say, your mom was not surprised, and I reckon a lot of African mothers, like, that's what they want, like their daughter gets married. It's like, when are you going to have a baby? Are you pregnant? Have you missed your period? What's going on? And there's that excitement that they often feel when they get called grandma. I think that's something a lot of African mothers definitely want for their own daughters. So, thank you for sharing that. I want us to talk a little bit about some of the cultural practices that you might have, planned to follow during pregnancy. I'm wondering if, there are things that are particular to your culture in Ghana for pregnant women to do, and were you able to do those things here?
I wouldn't point to like very specific, like exotic Ghanaian cultural practices. It's more, like very general things like take care of yourself and eat well. So it was more of like the eat well and make sure you're not eating junk. Like, particularly for my mom, that's something that she kept drumming into my ears that, like these are the things you should now start eating. Stay away from all the fried foods and all the oily food. So for me, it was more of, like eat well, get enough rest, and don't be stressed out. So yeah, I feel like those are not precise cultural practices, but much more, like general practices concerning pregnancy, like globally, I would say. So yeah, nothing in particular. I guess I would say one cultural practice too that my mom told me about, and I wouldn't be surprised if other people do this, is, after you have the baby in Ghanaian culture, you are told to like tie a cloth, like a piece of cloth around your tummy. So it's sort of like a waist trainer. So you use a piece
Mm-hmm.
of cloth to sort of like
Snatch back.
exactly to snatch back
Mhm.
your body, so the muscles and all the fat and do whatever they are supposed to do. So I guess for me that's also one cultural practice that I did or I look forward to doing.
Okay, okay. And I guess in terms of like preparing, um, preparation for the arrival of the baby, while you were pregnant, what helped you prepare? What made it easy? What made pregnancy easy? What made it difficult if there were things that were challenging?
So for me, one of the easiest things was having two very close friends who had done it before. That made it so easy. And particularly because they had done it in the US, they were Ghanaian women like me, they were Christian women like me, we were age mates. And so it was very easy to have access to every single information that I needed. And also one of them in particular did this thing for me. She wrote a list and she shared it with me via iMessage. She wrote a list of every single baby thing I would need. So really, I literally just had to go to the list. Okay, Akosia says I need this. Akosia says I need this. Put it on my registry, and then do all of that. So for me, I had access to all the information I could possibly need, and so it made preparation like very very easy for me. And then also, this thing about good internet in this part of the world that I was talking about, it made things very smooth for me in the sense that if I needed information on how to use a particular baby care item, I would just go and watch a video. So let's say, for example, with the putting together the stroller, the crib, and things like that, it was just videos that I was watching. I remember when I was putting the dresser together for my baby's clothes, I just went online and then like found like pictures and videos of how to like put assemble furniture together, and then like within an hour, 30 minutes, it was done. So for me, I would say just access to something that seems very ordinary and basic, like internet, really made my preparation much easier. And also another thing now that I think about it would be in a funny way, like the skills I had as a grad student really helped me. And this is what I mean. So, in grad school, particularly in a field like history, we know how to find information about whatever we need. And so, having that particular skill really helped me in the sense that I was able to like comb through the large amount of information that the internet throws at you concerning pregnancy. And I was able to sift through that. Okay, this makes sense. Like, how are they substantiating like this particular thing they are saying? Is it a doctor? Who is the source that is, like recommending this particular practice? So I would say that particular skill that I had got as a grad student really helped me with preparing for pregnancy. And even with regards to finding resources, there was so much of the information that I already knew even before I went to the doctor's office, and the doctor would say, eat this, don't do this. I had read about it, spoken to people about it. So a lot of the things, it wasn't really a lot of new things for me, I guess I would say. So that's why I make that link to the skills that I had gotten in grad school and then how it helped me to prepare for the pregnancy
So
journey.
it sounds like just having a community of friends who had done it before, but not just friends, but friends that look like you, share the same, beliefs and faith as you, and also just like ability to just like research for information on the internet was very helpful. Um,
Exactly.
uh, yeah, thanks for sharing that. In terms of like healthcare and healthcare providers, how do they impact your pregnancy experience?
So for me, and this is one thing that I'm always thankful for, the fact that I had a very, very experienced doctor. Honestly, when other women talk about how challenging birth was, for me, I always say I had a very smooth birth. Like, honestly, like I don't even remember feeling any pain, but that's because I took the epidural.
Wow.
Yeah, but more on that, yeah, but more on that later. So I would say
Mhm.
I had a doctor who knew what she was doing. And when I was
Okay.
selecting her, one thing that I wanted a person of color. So
Okay.
when I first did the whole, you have to go and do the labs because sometimes the pregnancy like test kits are not the most reliable thing. So it's much better to go to like, so I went to the students clinic, did the whole urine thing, then they gave me the results. And then I mean, of course, in their diplomatic way, they ask if you want to keep the pregnancy or you want to, like terminate it for reasons known to you. And so I decided to ask the nurse if she could share with me like any recommendations of good doctors to use because I mean if other students have, like used the students clinic before, maybe surely there's a particular doctor who a lot of like student immigrants prefer. And so she gave me like this tall list of, doctors. And so I mean I took the papers, I took it home and then I began, I guess, my process of elimination. And so for me, I specifically wanted a person of color. And then I limited it and I think I ended up with two people. And yeah, it was also shocking. A lot of the providers were white people, right? So I found this woman of color. She had excellent reviews. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's give it a try. So I just decided to go with it. And yeah, I don't regret that decision because she really knew what she was doing.
That's awesome. And when you say person of color, did it did it matter to you that the person was a black doctor, or would it have been okay if the person was a another person of color who wasn't black?
That's a really great question. And the doctor wasn't black. I think she was from a Southeast Asian country. I think was it
Okay.
Philippines? Yeah. But she was a Southeast Asian woman. So yeah. Person of color, not black, yes.
Okay. Okay.
So it didn't matter for me. I just needed a person of color because if there were certain, like cultural practices that I needed the person to consider with regards to, tailoring a certain plan of care for me, I wanted the person to understand why I was asking for something like that. So, for example, if I say I'm going to end up like circumcising my child, I need you to not ridicule me or like
Right.
shame me, right? I need you to understand why I want that. And then also, even with regards to things like diet, so the Ghanaian diet is primarily we eat a lot of rice, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you can attest to that, Jumoke.
Oh
We
yeah.
eat a lot of rice. And so, yeah, and so if you're when you're asking me what my eating habits look like, and I tell you that I'm struggling with like my rice consumption, luckily she understood because she comes from a culture where they also eat a lot of rice. And
Right.
so I found that, like very helpful to me. So that's for me primarily one of the reasons why I leaned towards a person of color.
Okay. So it sounds like you wanted somebody who could understand some of the preferences that you had in terms of like
Yeah.
like cultural things for diet and just like decisions that you felt as a Ghanaian was important for you. In terms
Yeah.
of like the healthcare that this doctor provided, what were some things that stood out to you or that made your pregnancy experience
Okay.
smooth?
So one of the things is the fact that in instances where I was not comfortable with how the nurses were doing like certain things, the doctor would be quick to say, let me give it a try because patients have said that when I do it, it's much more easier. So I'll give you an example. So getting towards the end of the pregnancy, they had to check to see like how dilated my cervix was. And oh my God, that examination was so invasive. And when the nurses would try to do it, I mean, I would scream because it was painful. But then the doctor quickly swooped in and would say, you know what, don't worry, don't check her again. I would just like call me and then let me do it myself. And so for me, I really appreciated the fact that she knows that she has much more experience compared to the other healthcare professionals who were taking care of me. And so she would be quick to say, let me give it a try because it's likely that I would be able to do it in a much more comfortable way for you. And so I really appreciated that. And then also one thing that the doctor did that I really appreciated was the fact that she was always checking in on me to see how I was doing. Because for me, I went through close to 80% of my pregnancy alone. My husband hadn't come by then. And so she was in the very first meeting, she asked me what my family and home life looked like. And so I think she made a note of the fact that, okay, I was a student, I was an immigrant, I didn't have family here, and my husband wasn't here. And so a lot of the support would be like via phone call. And so for subsequent meetings, she was always checking in on me to see if my husband had come, was he going to come, and how is he supporting me, even though he was not physically present here. So I really appreciated the fact that she was doing a lot of these check-ins on the state of, I guess, and what my family looked like and how she could, like offer input to assist me when it came to that.
Sound like you had a great doctor. Yeah, I'm glad you had that kind of experience. So now I want us to talk about postpartum and recovery and mental health and you know, a lot of women, especially immigrants, sometimes, during postpartum, for some women, they have like family and they have like their moms or their mother-in-law would come stay with them. For some other women, they don't have that kind of support, unfortunately. And so I'm wondering, did you have support from your family or friends during the postpartum period? And if you did have support, what kind of supports did they provide to you?
Thank you so much. I think that's a great question. For me, I would say and in retrospect, like as I think about it, I feel like a bit emotional because it's crazy how I was able to do it because I didn't have any family here. I didn't have anything here like, oh, an aunt who lives in a different state who was taking 2 weeks off work to come and help me. Nope, I didn't have that kind of support. So it was mainly people just calling me and checking, are you eating well? We are praying for you. Is there like anything we can do to help? Everything will be fine. So I guess I would say like support came in the form of like affirmative words. So that's the kind of support that a lot of people in my circle gave me because they couldn't be there physically, not because they didn't want to, but then because the circumstances of life just wouldn't make that possible. And also, another kind of support I had was so I go to a Ghanaian church. So it means that I'm surrounded by so many Ghanaian aunties and, there are a couple of doctors and mothers in church. So, it's people offering once again like words of support and saying, if you need anything, reach out to me. So I would say in terms of physical support, someone coming to like cook a meal for you so you don't have to cook. I didn't have any of that. But luckily, I had enough strength to be able to do things like clean my bathroom, continue to like meal prep and do all of those things before like my husband came and then started doing some of these things to help me. But for me, the primary form of support was the affirmative words that a lot of
Hmm.
people gave me
Hmm.
during this time.
At what point after you had the baby was your husband able to join you in the US?
So my husband came when I was in my 8th month.
Okay, so he was here when you gave birth to the baby.
Yes. Yes, he was here.
Okay. Okay. And so that means during the postpartum period, he was there to primarily provide support. So he was the only one who was there with you. Or did you have your mom or his mom come around?
No, it was just my husband and I figuring things out by ourselves.
when you say figuring things out, what does that look like? How did you figure things out? Did you speak to other couples like you who had babies, or was it just internet? And yeah, how did you figure things out?
So really, it was a bit of both. And I remember the very first time we've done all the paperwork and everything. We are ready to leave, and then you get home with a baby, and we've packed the car and we are wondering, okay, now we've brought the baby home. Like, okay, what are we supposed to do with him now? Like, are we leaving him in the car seat? Are we removing him? Are we giving him food? It was just, a very funny first couple of minutes because it's like, wait, so the doctors actually just left us to bring like a fresh baby home by ourselves. Do they even care if I can take care of this person or I'm going to starve him? But that's just on the lighter side. But I would I would say it was a bit of both, a bit of internet, a bit of the book my doctor gave me, which was, like they had labeled things according to week and what to do after bed. So it was just, like checking over your notes. Okay, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to give him this, not give him this. So it really felt like when you study for an exam and then now it's time for the exam and you need to deliver. So it was going back to information that we had read, had watched videos about, spoken to other people about. And in the instances where we faced a hurdle, just call people. There were always a ton of people to call. Okay, the baby's not sleeping through the night. Make a phone call. You get someone to give you some tips. You always get someone texting to check in on you. So there was always, that. And my babies, the pediatrician also, I mean, it was a very good I guess doctor's office because you could call if you had any questions and then they'll tell you what to do. I remember when we went through the phase where my baby was struggling to pass gas, and I mean I had done all the reading and people were swearing by what's the name of this there's this liquid gripe water. Yes, a lot of mothers were swearing by gripe water and how it helps their baby pass gas. But for me, because I guess I'm more, like academically inclined, I need to do my checks, have an expert say go for it before I do it. I'm not just going to believe some random stranger on the internet. So I mean, I would call the pediatrician's office and say, hey, is it okay if I give them this particular medication? How much of it can I give them? So when I get a go ahead, then I would proceed. So a lot of it was phone calls and then verifying information before you give the baby anything or do anything to them. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And how did you, as a new mom, survive postpartum? Was it challenging? Was he a breeze because you had your husband with you? How did you navigate your own identity as Matilda, and now you're somebody's mother, but you still have like other commitments, like your PhD work and your role as a wife as well. How did you navigate all of those things during the postpartum period?
Honestly, I would say it was a lot of having to unlearn certain things and, be at peace with the new normal. And what I mean is that before having a baby, I could do like things like block out a large chunk of time and dedicate it to a particular task. So, for example, if let's say today was a day that I wanted to do a bit of reading and writing, I could dedicate four blocks of hours to reading and just sitting with my books and typing and doing other things. But with a baby, I had to become comfortable with the idea that it doesn't work that way. You have to become used to working in small bits of time. And so and the thing is, if you do not quickly get your mind around the fact that your life has changed, you become frustrated very easily. So then you begin to feel like a failure in terms of, okay, I'm not making a lot of progress on my academic work because you are equating progress to being able to have large amount of uninterrupted time doing schoolwork. And now because you can't have that again, you think that somehow you have failed as a graduate student. I had to quickly unlearn that, nope, the new metrics for success had changed. And luckily for me, I had a very, very, very supportive advisor. My advisor always encouraged me to, like take things easy. You have a baby now. Some of the things we can put on hold until you settle in your role as a mother, and then we can come back to it. So a lot of it a lot of it was on learning certain things. And I would say the first couple of months, oh my goodness, so challenging, so challenging. One of the ways that I survived was because a lot of people who had experience just reassured me of the fact that the babies, they don't stay the same. They evolve as time passes, because the first couple of months is a baby who really doesn't know how to sleep. It's like they have no sense of day and night. And I had one of those babies that did not understand that the books and the expect are telling you to sleep on your back. So I can't put you on my chest to sleep through the night. So it was just a nightmare. And I could literally go through days and nights where I was sleeping like 15 minutes, then I'll wake up for 2 hours, and then I'll get another, like 20 minutes of sleep, and then so on and so forth. So the first couple of months was very, very challenging. And I remember, and my husband and I have a picture of it. The very first doctor's appointment we went to, if you see our faces in the pictures, we look so exhausted because we were so sleep deprived. And the baby was looking very rested. And I'm like, of course you look rested. You're the one who was enjoying your sleep, and we were the ones who had to watch you and make sure, you are not suffocating, or something
Mm.
hasn't beaten you in the crib or something. So
Right, right.
it was very, very challenging. And yeah, now that I think about it, yeah, I don't even know how we survived it. But yeah, I mean, for me, one important thing was just hearing those ahead of me, what they had done, and their 2 cents about a lot of things, and then just letting that advice comfort me and give me assurance of what is to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like, just the mental shifts that you had to make from one, defining what the new success looks like as a PhD student who's also a mom, but also having a supportive community, like the people that I share their own experience with you, your advisor who told you over time that it's okay to push some things back. Sounds like those were the things that actually like held you down during that period. So thank you so much for sharing that. Again, but during postpartum, the postpartum phase, did you experience any anxiety or depression in that particular stage of your recovery?
So in the postpartum phase, and yeah, thank you for bringing that question up. I think it's, yeah, an aspect of my pregnancy that I haven't really, like, reflected on. So I'll tell you this. When I went for the very first doctor's appointment after, like the 6 weeks after you've had a baby, they give you a questionnaire to fill, and it's a way for them to gauge whether you are suffering from postpartum depression. And it was actually one of my frustrations, and for me, one of the lowest points of America's healthcare system. And what I mean is that it's basically you being given a piece of paper and being told to fill the information. And then afterwards, they gauge your answers and they tell you, okay, we want to put you on antidepressants. And for me, I remember when I was filling that question, honestly, I was so exhausted. I wasn't even paying attention to a lot of the answers. And so for me, a lot of my answers were like very like neutral, when they give you like a skill and they say, pick always, hardly, never, sometimes, and all of that. So a lot of my answers were very neutral. And also because, see, I was like so exhausted. I am really not in the mental place to come and dedicate a lot of thinking to this. So my husband and I are in the car park, going home after getting the car and going back home after the appointment. And then the nurse calls me and she says that, like based on the numerical, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
interpretation of my answers, they want to put me on like antidepressants. And so I'm like, wait, what? You guys just in less than 30 minutes after I fill the form, simply tell me
Just
you want to
decide
give
that.
me
Yeah.
medication, right? Without, like a subsequent conversation, without asking me any questions, just like that,
Right.
you're going to put me on medication. I'm like, no, I decline. And can you like put me through my doctor and let her explain and let her okay for me that it's fine. I'm not going to take this medication. So she calls her doctor and she checks the doctor, and the doctor says, yeah, it's fine. If I don't want to take it, I don't want to take it. And that's the end of the conversation. And the reason why, in retrospect, I say it was a low point for me was because I felt like there was, like very little effort or very little thinking that went into quickly deciding to put someone on a medication, because we are talking about medications that would, like tamper or affect the way that, like you process emotion. So if you are not recommending me talking to any mental health counselor or any professional of the sort, and quickly your first go-to is I'm going to give you medication, it
Right.
doesn't make any
Right.
sense. And I
Yeah.
mean, there wasn't even any room to ask any questions. This was just the lady who does the scheduling who tells me, okay, we want to give you medicine. It wasn't even the nurse.
Not even the
Exactly.
nurse. Not even the nurse or the doctor. It was a
Just the receptionist saying, okay, based on your answers, we want to give you medication. And I mean, I remember I was on loudspeaker and my husband was shaking his head like, no, like none of this makes sense. We are not going to just take medicine because you just
Mhm,
graded like some answers and said you need to give us
mhm.
medication. So they're like, nope, we declined it. And I don't regret doing that because in the days after, in the weeks after, I quickly went back to myself. For me, like I said, it was a lot of exhaustion and being comfortable with what my new like normal was. So I didn't quite understand why, the healthcare professionals were very quick to term it as postpartum depression. So for me, yeah, that's just my experience with that particular aspect of my journey.
This episode of Birthing Beyond Borders is funded by the 4W Initiative and supported by the African Center for Community Development. Please check out these two wonderful organizations. Details can be found in the description below. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And first of all, I'm sorry that that happened. I agree with you that a conversation should have taken place. Like, come in, let's talk about it. What's going on? Are you tired? And I also think that sometimes all these tools, i- it's not always black and white. They're always very, like in your case, you're just really exhausted. There's always gray areas. And so, like, and I think that's like, as a qualitative researcher, I think that's why I would always like advocate for best case scenario mixed methods. I think that quant data alone doesn't tell full stories. Imagine if you're not educated enough or like self-aware to push back and say no, I don't want this, you just take this medicine and in 2 weeks after you're fine. You just really needed time to rest or sleep.
With regards to this, I remember one of the things a friend of mine, and her name is Fafa. She actually has her PhD in nutrition and dietetics, so she has a bit of experience with the healthcare system here. And one of the things she told me in the preparation stages was the fact that I need to like learn how to advocate for myself, because then in the US, with regards to healthcare, if you don't do that, they are going to force a lot of things on you that you may not have the chance to say no or ask questions about. So for me, I was, like very alert and on my game with the fact that nope, you guys are not going to market anything to me that I'm not going to, like ask probing questions about. So I feel like that really kept me on my toes. And I think one of the reasons why my doctor probably said it's fine if she doesn't want to take it, we won't force it on her, was that when I went in for the test, she was asking me, like some general questions. So I guess from that, she had ascertained that, okay, this person is fine. Like nothing about her answers or her responses give me concern. So even if the paper test is saying something different and she says she doesn't want the medicine, it's fine. So I guess that's why my doctor probably didn't make a big deal about it, because maybe from a bit of our check-in conversation, she had ascertained that, okay, there isn't a lot of red flags that we need to follow up on.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that experience. I want to talk a little bit about the role that religious practices or organization play in mental health during the postpartum period. I heard you say that you attend a Ghanaian church, and they're like aunties and mothers in the church, that provided support in terms of like advice and reassurance during the pregnancy period. I was wondering if, the church also played a role in terms of like your mental health navigating your new norm.
Yes, I would say they played a significant role. And one of the things, I guess, on the spiritual aspect of things was the prayers. Like the prayers really, really, really helped. And a lot of very affirmative words. And people, saying, we are with you in prayer. People offering to, like I would have people call me in the middle of the week just to check up on me to see if I was eating well, if I was feeling well, and then say a prayer with me. And even beyond just, like more spiritual inclined things like prayers, they also did practical things like buying, like some baby items for me. So my church organized a baby shower for me. So one of the Sundays, before I had my baby and after service, they just, like surprised me and another mother in church who was coincidentally having twins. So they had a baby shower with us. And for me personally, I got enough diapers and wipes to the point that my son is going to be 1 year next month and I haven't bought pampers and wipes. That's how much, yeah, diapers I got for my baby shower. So for me, that was one practical way that my church community supported me, even beyond just the spiritual practices and acts. There was also, like very tangible forms of help, like buying me things that I would need. So it makes, like my financial investment in this new part of my life much more reduced.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Matilda. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the resources, both formal and informal, that you found to be helpful. And I want you to share um how you found out about these resources. I know a lot of women talk about having doulas and community organizations where they can get free car seats for their babies. Were there any formal or informal resources that you found to be helpful, and how did you find out about them?
So for me, one of the first resources and something that I would always, like press on women to use is your voice. And when I say your voice, what I mean is normalize asking questions. So for me, a lot of the resources that I was able to come by was because I was always asking people, how did you do this? How do you do this? Where do I find this? And so for me, when I was asking people for resources, I had a friend, the one who made me the list of the things to buy for the baby. She recommended this app. And since then, it's a resource I have been sharing with every single pregnant woman. It's called Baby Center. So what Baby Center does is that it lets you put in your information, and then it helps you to compute when your baby is going to be due. So every single week, it tells you what is happening with the growth of the baby. The next week, it tells you this is a different thing that is happening. And then it gives you different articles and resources for learning more about the baby's growth and development in that particular week. And with that particular resource, another component that was very helpful was that they had a community board. So, for me, for example, who was going to have my baby in, let's say, November 2024, there would be a community board for all women who are having their babies in November 2024. And there would be conversations of all sorts. So, someone would ask a question about, is this product better than this product? What would you recommend for this? I saw my baby has this particular rash. My baby is pooping a certain color. What does it mean? And you would have people sharing their experiences. So for me, it was so, 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 so helpful. And the fact that a lot of women were very willing to share their resources with me really, really helped. And so, yes, for me, one of the resources, use your voice, ladies, use your voice. Because if you keep quiet about what your current season and situation looks like, then people wouldn't know how to help you. But if you vocally articulate what your needs are and like how others can help you, then people can come to your rescue. Of course, it's a completely different thing if you are asking people to support you and then they are not, right? And another resource I would say is also just, like curiosity. Like just being curious enough to know that, okay, if I go on Google and they give me, say, like 5 different articles with 5 different perspectives, that there is a way that I would, like sieve through the information and verify to see that, okay, this is like standard and best practices when you are taking care of a baby or when you are taking care of yourself, because there is a lot of information out there. So you have to be curious enough to like know, okay, why are people saying this? Why are a group of people like leaning towards a certain preferred method of medication or a certain like preferred product?
Thank you. And are there services or resources that you wish you had known about or had access to?
I mean, so I heard about doulas, and I know a Ghanaian lady who used a doula, and for her it was because she didn't have in like myself, she didn't have any family coming in. But for me, I mean, in retrospect, I probably maybe in my next pregnancy would consider like using a doula, because I mean it would be nice to have more hands-on experience from somebody who like knows what they are doing, instead of my husband and I who would be figuring out things from books and the internet. So yeah, it would yeah, I guess that particular
Right.
resource would have been nice to consider. But at the time, one reason why we didn't consider it was because we felt like it was a bit invasive. It's something very private and you're asking a complete, I guess, stranger who you don't know anything about to be coming into your home and all of that. So I guess that's a resource that I would consider. And then let's see. And also, what you talk about with regards to organizations that give you like strollers and stuff like that. I didn't know of any such organization. So maybe I wasn't surrounded by people who had used a resource of that nature. So yeah, if I had, maybe I would have considered going that route and saving my money on a baby stroller, which is irritatingly expensive to buy. So
Yeah. And for, expecting mothers listening to this, there are community-based organizations that can provide you with some of these things. I also know that your insurance company can provide you with a free breast pump. These are some things that you don't have to spend money on, and you can get if you qualify for them. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to these community organizations and just find out what's out there. Just ask, like Matilda said, you need to be comfortable asking questions and just ask people. If you have a Facebook community group, ask. If you go to the hospital, ask the nurse about the resources that are available to mothers in your area. So I guess, for the last section of this podcast episode, Matilda, I want to talk about reflections. And, I know you've shared some advice to some of the mothers listening to us, but I want us to kind of look back a little bit. Is there anything you'd have done differently during your perinatal journey?
Honestly, I would have rested more. Yeah, I think for me, because it was my very first baby, I was so anxious to get a lot of things out of the way that I didn't really just sleep, you know, like put your phone away, put the laptop away, put the books away, and just sleep like your life depends on it. I feel like if I could go back, that's something that I would do, because honestly, now sleep is a gift. If I can go a night where my son is not trying to tear my breast off, it's a gift from the universe. So if I could go back, I would say do a lot of sleeping and less worrying, because there was also a lot of worry about, do I have enough money? Have I covered all my bases? Do I have enough products? Do I have enough warm clothes for the baby? So I would sleep more and worry less. And also, I guess another thing I want to say, and this would also be, like advice to other women preparing to get pregnant or go on this journey, would be to take better care of my health with regards to diet. And I say this because at a point in the pregnancy, and other women will attest to this, you have to do a sugar glucose test. And for me, I actually failed that test by 1 point. And so I actually had gestational diabetes when I was pregnant. And so what that meant was that I had to go through the pregnancy, like
Oh, wow.
pricking myself with a needle and checking my sugar levels after every meal. And that's because I'd failed my glucose test by missing it by 1 point. And so I say this to say that just be careful about what you are eating, because your body has a funny way of letting you face the consequences of certain diet choices at a moment when you might not expect it. And so I feel like in retrospect, if I had taken better care of my health with regards to, just chilling and relaxing with the sugar content, then I would have avoided, the whole like gestational diabetes thing. I mean, initially it sounded, like very scary, but then, I mean, of course, I hit the books, I hit the resources, and then it was just something that I had to control with my diet. So unfortunately, I had to reduce the amount of carbohydrates I was eating. So that meant that very little rice. It was so painful.
Okay, no more rice.
Right? Like so, so, so painful. And the day my doctor and I discussed the results, it was so funny, because she was like, I know the rice is tasty, because I mean, they eat a lot of rice. So she was like, I should just like weather the storm until I'm done with the baby, and then I can go back to eating all the rice I want to eat. Yeah. So I had to go see a dietitian, and they had to show me the quantity of carbohydrates to eat, because for me, yeah, my sin was that I really like rice, like so so much. I can eat rice every single day of the week. And so it didn't come as too much of a surprise that, yeah, I failed my glucose test, because yeah, my body was just swimming with all that jollof rice. So yeah, I guess I would say to women that just be more, scrupulous with how you take care of your health before you have a baby. And because you anything can happen, that's the thing. And I had a friend
Right.
who always advised me to be doing like, do some physical exercise, be stretching,
Mhm.
and be doing all sorts of things, because your body changes in a very funny way after you have a baby. All of a sudden your back and your waist, they're never the same after you have the baby. And so just do what you can to prepare your body for the important assignment of carrying and making another life. So I guess if I could go back differently, I would go, like several years back to my early 20s when I had the strength and I had the flexibility with what I wanted to eat and how I could eat it. And yeah, I would do a much better job in preparation for becoming a mother years later.
Thank you so much, Matilda. You've answered some of my next question. I was going to say, what advice do you have for new African immigrant mothers who are currently pregnant or planning to get pregnant? So I'll go to our next question, which is also the final question. What message would you like healthcare providers or organizations that provide service to mothers, what would you like them to hear as it relates to providing care to African immigrant mothers?
First of all, I would like them to understand that for a lot of African immigrants, religion is a very significant part of our identity, our makeup, and our reality. And so, if there's an African immigrant mother who makes a certain preference for her care, you need to understand and respect the fact that there are religious considerations for that particular thing. And so we shouldn't raise a lot of eyebrows or funny attitude with regards to what our preference is. And then also, secondly, with my own personal experience, I would say we need a lot more diligence where certain things like medication is concerned. You don't just jump to saying, I'm going to give you medicine because you scored maybe like 4 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 on a list of questions that we gave you to answer, right? Without, extensive conversation about what postpartum depression presents as and why the person maybe chose like certain responses, because it's like what you were saying, a mixed methods approach will be much more preferable instead of just telling mothers to answer a bunch of questions. So I would say professionals should reevaluate the methods by which they try to diagnose postpartum depression in African immigrant mothers, because also we are coming from a culture where we don't know a lot about this. It's the process of immigration and more exposure that is making us aware to a lot of recent things and a lot of recent hot button conversations like mental health. And so we would appreciate every single information we can get about certain things. And then I guess lastly, one thing they should hear about, I really want them to hear is the fact that they should relax with, or they should be more diligent in how they do certain things, because certain, I guess, poor decisions on their part means I have to pay more. And I'll give you an example. So, towards the end, my doctor's office had to do something called non-stress test. And basically what it is that they put a band around your belly and then try to gauge the baby's movement, because they want to make sure the baby is moving and that the baby, nothing has happened to the baby. So there would be a couple of instances where my husband and I would go, and then they'll strap me in all the bandages and cords and ropes and whatnot, and then set up the machine, and then they wouldn't be getting the amount of movement that they needed. And so I would tell them that with some of the nurses, there was an instance where there was a nurse who was clearly a student in training. And even when she was putting the bandage and setting up the machine, my husband and I looked at each other because we could tell the way she was doing it was wrong. And so we were not surprised when she was doing it. And then she was telling us, she's not getting like positive feedback. So we need to go to the main hospital and then have them like redo it. My husband and I were not surprised. But then the negative impact of she not doing it well was that it means that now the hospital is going to send us a bill, because instead of we doing that test at our doctor's office and letting the insurance company pay for it, then we have to incur another cost, because then now we have to cross the street. Luckily, it was just like one street between my doctor's office and the main hospital. Now we have to go to the main hospital and then have the, I guess, professionals and the better equipment do all of that. And so I say this to say that if some of the professionals are much more diligent in administering kinds of care, it would be less financial burden on us, because this thing I talk about, it happened like twice. So for every different doctor's appointment, you have a different nurse. And if the nurse doesn't do it well, it means that they're not going to get the numbers. It means go to the main hospital, let them do it, and let's be sure the baby is fine. And then you go and the main hospital says there's nothing wrong with the baby. And I'm like, okay, so couldn't my doctor's office have done this so I don't have to take time out of my day? I don't have to pay extra for me to come and lie down for 10 minutes. Then you tell me my baby is fine, because it just didn't make sense. And it means you are shelling out money that you could otherwise keep and use for something else. So I guess that would be my last bit of advice.
Thank you so much, Matilda. This has been so insightful. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to point out that for our non-academic audience, when we say mixed method, we're really just talking about using multiple sources of data. So like collecting quantitative data, which is like the surveys, and then collecting qualitative data, which is like interviews or conversations with pregnant mom. So yeah. Thank you once again, Matilda, for taking the time to chat with me today. I've really enjoyed our conversation and I've learned a whole lot. And I'm sure our audience would be, very appreciative of this conversation as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Birthing Beyond Borders. I hope you've learned something new or felt seen in today's conversation. If you're a mom listening today, know that you're doing an incredible job. And as a community, we are so proud of you. Please share this episode with another mom or with a friend who might find it helpful. Remember, you are not alone and you don't need permission to do the things that bring you joy. I'm rooting for you. Goodbye.